Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ergonomics Health Spotlight, where we speak with providers, subject matter experts, and other key players in the field about the various aspects of worker wellness that are affecting you and your company today. Entering into the final quarter of the year, the teams at Ergonomics Health have begun looking forward to 2025 and reviewing the lasting impacts from 2024. From conferences to internal innovations, there have been major impacts on the future of ergonomics. Stefan Scholes and Josh Levinson, members of our ergonomics team, join us today to discuss artificial intelligence, ergonomic technologies, new innovations in equipment, and more. Thank you both so much for joining me today on the Ergonomics Health Spotlight. I'm really excited to have you both on. Before we start, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background. How did you start in ergonomics? How did you, begin this journey? Where did you originally come from, and how long have you been with Ergonomics Health?
So my name is Josh Levinson. I have been a physical therapist actually for many, many years, over 20 years before I came to Briotics. And I had been recruited by Briotics as a physical therapist originally, working at a corporate setting. And I started working there and they said, hey, we also do office ergonomics as well. So can you do a little bit of that? And I started doing office ergonomics and said, this is kind of cool. I really like this. It kind of ties in nicely with what I'm doing as a physical therapist. It feels like a nice combination of roles to play. I was asked maybe a year into my role as a physical therapist to provide a one-off ergonomic evaluation at a casino. And so this was like a 2-day casino job. I had gone off and with some knowledge of ergonomics and some training, I completed this evaluation, and which I found fascinating, and provided a comprehensive report. I learned a lot from my mentor. And then years later, I was asked to participate more in the ergonomic process, became more involved with ergonomics, and eventually became a project manager in ergonomics.
Yeah, hi there. My name is Stefan Schultz. I've been with the company for 20 years. I'm a physical therapist also by background, and maybe came over to the ergonomic side a bit relatively early in my PT career. I was treating a lot of longshoremen from the port of Oakland, and I noticed that whenever I would release them to full duty, they would be back 2 weeks later with a re-injury. And I started thinking that for me to be really effective as a healthcare provider, it would behoove me to actually have a knowledge or have an understanding of what people do at work, which was obviously the source of their problems. And so I purposely sought a position that would enable me to treat on site, where I could understand the work and the worker and the tasks at hand. And that was pre-care at the time. This was now 20 years ago. I've been with the company ever since in a variety of different type of roles, and as a physical therapist, as a service provider, and now I lead the ergonomics team at Briotics Health.
Awesome. I mean, those are both, I think, really interesting journeys of where you started, how you kind of saw the evolution of there's more to care than just what I'm doing right now. There's more I can do. So diving into the topic for today, the trends of the last year of 2024 and moving into 2025, kind of what we're looking forward to. I'd love to start off with the basis of what we've seen before, kind of the predictions we put out for 2024, what we saw coming. And starting off with those is new technologies. So some of the things we mentioned specifically in those new technologies were exoskeletons and artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is probably a whole bundle on its own, so we'll save that for the later part of this question. But I'd love to do a quick focus in on the prevalence of exoskeletons and similar wearable devices.
Yeah, so let's start maybe talking about exos, right? I think we can talk most about exos. I think what we're seeing is we are indeed seeing clients exploring exoskeletons and coming to us to ask our opinion and input from a subject matter expertise about where exoskeletons might be useful. And what we've been discovering over the last year is, for the most part, the use cases that we see for exoskeletons tend to be relatively narrow, meaning that clients tend to approach exoskeletons as potentially sort of like a broader solution that they actually are in practice. And for the most part, what we experience is that when we start digging into the details of what problems they are trying to solve with exoskeletons, it typically turns out that exoskeletons might not be the number one solution that you might want to bring to the table, although it might be a solution down the road, but it's not the first thing you should probably think about. So there are certain really heavy tasks that are being exposed in the exoskeleton world. Construction has been the most recent sort of like focus in the research community, where exoskeletons are being thought of as additional tool sets, but not something that people would be wearing all day long. So you have to be very specific about your use case and very specific about the specific type of exoskeleton and very specific about your training and use for using them. So to summarize, I would say it is still a topic, but it's not as broad of a topic in terms of its application in practice.
With the kind of rise of, I'd say, evolution of artificial intelligence over the last year, and especially our forays as a company into a deeper investment into computer vision technologies, things along these lines of data analysis, things like that. What are you two seeing in the field with these technologies in regards to ergonomics? Are they being used to, help with data end analysis? Are they being used in workplaces by workers to help, discover new ergonomic solutions, or by management? What are you two seeing in that regard there?
The Ergo Plus software utilizes AI in the evaluation. And so we can either input our data traditionally using our traditional ergonomic tools, or we can actually use AI and take a short clip of the video and upload it to the system, and it'll actually add in the data points and use an ergonomic tool in the background to analyze that worker doing the work and provide us the information that we need. And so we can use AI. Normally we use the video as part of our normal ergonomic evaluation, and then we'll review the video and manually input data into our system and get our results. But this gives us a very quick, concise, and an easy to use way to extract data very quickly. It's also a good way to demonstrate to clients that we have ergonomic risk at a very high level, because it indicates red, I believe orange and green data points and lines, and superimposed over the video of the person doing the work, where the ergonomic risk is in a very visual way. So clients tend to not like to read a lot of minutia. They just want to see what the problem is and have recommendations. So this gives us a very good way to provide in a very quick way what the problem is with a still image or a video image, and then provide simple recommendations. I'll also add that I was at the National Ergo Conference and Expo last week in Las Vegas, and this was a hot topic. And there was at least one presentation where they talked about the use of that system, where you take a video clip and then you can superimpose data on top of that video clip. And what was interesting about that is that, so this one company was using it. They have sites all over the world, hundreds and hundreds of sites. The question was asked, is this a viable way to analyze data and find risk? And the answer is, it may not be perfect, but an analysis of ergonomic professionals performing the same ergonomic assessment in the old-fashioned way with data was very unreliable. There was very poor reliability between those people. But there was actually relatively good reliability between the different systems. There are multiple systems right now working with the AI, and we can capture a lot of data remotely. We could just have someone take a video at a site who doesn't have a whole lot of ergonomic experience and capture that data and actually create an ergonomic report based on that. So there's a lot out there. It's very exciting and a lot of potential.
Sticking with new technologies, are there anything that have any really, ideas that you've seen over the past year, or the past few months, that you think might be seeing a resurgence in 2025, or something new that's coming up in the new year that you're excited, just learn more about or see more in the industry?
I think AI is really the future. I think that we have a lot of thinking to do and soul searching in the world of ergonomics because AI can take work from us and it can add work. It's just like we need people to analyze the data and to create the AI and to help manage the AI and manage the program. But at the same time, we may not need someone to travel to California from New York or to travel to a site to perform the ergonomic assessment, perhaps. And so I think as a company and just in the field of ergonomics, that's something that came up in this conference I was just at. It's do we need to be there on site to conduct this traditional old-fashioned ergonomic assessment where we're taking tape measures and measuring? Do we need all that data, or could we just get by with using AI to give us the information that we need? AI is also, it's actually going to provide recommendations based on that data automatically. And so that's going to be an interesting way in which AI will be used. And I look forward to seeing how that pans out with our software that we're using.
Yeah, I'd probably say the same thing, sort of like automating recommendations and having AI not just provide data inputs, but also interpret what's being captured on camera. Those systems aren't super sophisticated in object or movement detection, for example. But in the future, having an AI program identify that what we're seeing here is lifting, what we're seeing here is gripping, and also incorporate the objects that are involved in that, that becomes richer data that potentially in the future we'll be able to automate or make reasonable predictions about what might be a good solution in that circumstance. And what Josh hinted at one is making recommendations for ergonomic solutions when, for example, lifting is involved. There are some standard ways to reduce the ergonomic risk of lifting that if a system could detect that lifting is involved of a particular object and the system can even identify the object, then those recommendations can become a lot more specific. It's also happening in the office space right now. So the leading edge is right now not just to identify awkward postures in the office setting, but be able to have the system contribute in recommendations about what to do with your monitor, what to do with your mouse, what to do with your keyboard. And those are object detection kind of functionality questions that aren't fully implemented yet, but these are things that we can look forward to in the future, I believe.
Moving away from that new technologies trend, is there a specific industry that you've seen more acceptance of ergonomics that's been, emerging, jumping up, that has, maybe in the past not accepted kind of the impact that ergonomics can have in the workplace? Is there an industry that really stands out to you that in 2024 that you think might be making even more inroads in 2025?
I would bring up the construction industry again as a primary target here. I think in construction, one of the things that's held us back or that's held companies back of engaging the ergonomic community to reduce ergonomic risk for their workforce is that a lot of these companies are small and are operating on a smaller scale and are also active remotely. So just the logistics of working in construction has been difficult, but reduce ergonomic risk in the industry, and this might be one of the industries where exoskeletons might actually be feasible or a useful tool set. So there's lots of potential in construction because, as we know, one of the primary risk drivers in ergonomics is load and force, exposure to excessive force. And we know there's a lot of that going on in construction, which we know isn't adequately addressed for most places. That's very different than having, say, a manufacturing facility where you can easily show up and see all the tasks happening at once, and it's a much more controlled environment. So, like from that perspective, looking in a construction might be something that is going to be on the upswing going forward.
I'll add something to that from my perspective. So we are currently involved with an ergonomic program, and so they have servers and computers, and these server buildings are enormous. There's a lot of material handling, and what is traditionally more of warehouse work that is being done by people that traditionally work with computers, and this is growing and growing monthly amongst many companies around the world. And so this cloud infrastructure needs ergonomics to support their workers who are traditionally working in a software environment or a different environment, who don't have the same culture as, say, a warehouse would have. And so we are working on both the equipment and then the macro ergonomic or the cultural end of ergonomics to help figure out how to make sense of people working in a different environment. And so this is something that's, I think, going to be growing, and I think there's a lot of potential in the future.
I think that dovetails perfectly into my next and kind of final question for our conversation today. Exploring ergonomics, there's a lot of people, when they look it up or they're searching online, the first thing they see is the equipment side of it. But there's also, the solution end, which is really where all of that equipment is put into use. Over the next year or during the past year, have there been rising trends in equipment that has really, popularized itself? Or are there new equipment pieces or solutions on the horizon that you're really excited to learn more about or see in action and understand the impact of?
I would say that I am disappointed at the quality and quantity of ergonomic equipment out there. There are some companies that are specialized in building ergonomic equipment and developing ergonomic equipment, but there hasn't been a whole lot. In fact, at the expo, I was just out in Las Vegas, that the expo section is getting smaller and smaller. There weren't a whole lot of vendors out there, so I don't see anything happening from the equipment standpoint moving forward at this point.
Do you see that as more of a lack of investment or a lack of need for the equipment itself?
I think there's a huge need for customized equipment, and the issue is customizability. And so there are few companies, I think, that are willing to go out on a limb and provide custom equipment. It's expensive and hard to make. And so I think that we have larger companies that are creating standard equipment that doesn't fit into a lot of the novel workplaces that we're working with these days, especially on my end, working with companies with computer servers and rack systems. And so I think that technology in the ergonomic or equipment technology hasn't been keeping up with the actual ergonomic need.
It's an interesting question because we look at ergonomics as more than just equipment, right? And a lot of times where, depending on where, the maturity level of a program and, a client's readiness to move forward in their ergonomic journey, sometimes what they need is actually something on the lower end of the spectrum. And they might need to actually work on engaging their managers to actually understand what ergonomics is and how it can benefit the company as a whole. And so I think sometimes, expensive equipment solutions might be superimposed over a workforce that's not ready for it. I was on site at a company earlier this year that had, about, 10 electric pallet jacks just sitting around, not being used. Why? Because the turning radius was too big. So they obviously didn't ask their workers whether or not the piece of equipment was going to be useful for their use case. And so here we were, with expensive equipment just sitting around. And a lot of that problem can be solved by seeking some worker input and seeking some management input before actually taking the dip into sort of the expensive equipment realm.
I completely agree with you, and I see this happening right now. The equipment is literally dropped on the floor, and people look at it and say, "What's this doing here?" But from a management perspective, it works from an ergonomic perspective. But when it comes down to the person doing the job, they don't understand why it's there. They don't know how to use it, so there isn't sufficient training a lot of the times. And they weren't asked about the usability. Is this actually going to be, is this usable? Is it fun to use? It doesn't have to be fun, but is it not unpleasant to use, right? So some of the equipment is unwieldy to move around. It's heavy. It makes sense on paper. It looks good. It looks like it's an ergonomic piece of equipment. But if you start using it, the usability of that equipment is just insufficient for a lot of people. And so they just don't use the equipment. And then we see equipment piled up in the corner somewhere, not being used.
Yeah.
So it's really the cultural aspect of ergonomics that needs to be addressed. It's the training, the culture, and as Stefan was saying, having different levels of the organization involved in the process from the bottom and the top. We don't want just managers ordering equipment. We want the workers to say, this is what I think we need, and let's try it out first before we order more.
Yeah. When equipment gets involved, a lot of times where people need the most help is how to run a proper trial. Right? How do you actually make certain that this is a good solution, and how do you involve workers to actually pilot test a piece of equipment prior to implementing it, across the entire organization? And those are some simple steps, I think, that can prevent a lot of headache. And
Absolutely.
prevent the introduction of unwanted problems that you didn't anticipate.
And I will add to that to complicate things even more. There's a socio-technical system. That's the how people and society is affected or interacts with technology. And so what I've encountered at a lot of sites is you have older employees who aren't really great with technology. They view it as a potential risk for their work, and they view it as a risk to the way they do their work. So even if it's not a risk to the work, it's not going to take over what they're doing. They view it as that they're able to do that work themselves and they're really good at it. So why do I need anything else to intervene? And so there's this very complex socio-technical system in place here. And so an ergonomist is really, an experienced ergonomist is best at figuring that out and figuring out ways to work with those employees and their supervisors and managers to ensure that that equipment is going to be used, and really figure out why they might not be using that equipment.
What you mentioned there right at the very end also loops back into our earlier conversation about artificial intelligence and how it's making waves. I think even with the speed that's accelerated from these recommendations that we're able to provide even quicker and analyze video faster, the value of an experienced ergonomist who has seen these things before, worked in many workplaces, and understands how people work really well, to be able to make those connections and see the final result in action will always be so valuable to not only us, but workers as well. Both of you, I want to thank you so much for jumping on with me today, talking a little bit about our ergonomics in the workplace, giving us some really valuable insight into what we're seeing in the future, some really interesting and in-depth data points that you're starting to experience. And I'm really excited to let other people hear this conversation, learn a little bit more about what you do on the daily and what kind of impacts you're seeing in the workplace. So thank you both so much for joining us. And I hope we can see you on the spotlight a little bit more in the future.
Oh, pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.